Assalamu alaikum, welcome to Game Changer. I'm Maryam Zia. In today's program, we will be talking about the recent developments surrounding the recently concluded OIC summit, in which it was urged by all the member states for, of course, a ceasefire in Gaza. In today's program, we will be talking about the urgent need for ceasefire and humanitarian aid in Gaza and what needs to be done by the international community at large. Of course, when we talk about the situation in Gaza, Israeli aggression has killed more than, of course, 34,000 people, innocent Palestinians in Gaza. And of course, when we talk about the recent developments, Israel is pushing for Rafa aggression as well. And of course, the world community is urging Israel not to go towards this action. But of course, what needs to be done more by the international community, we will be talking all about this in today's program. And of course, when we talk about UN Secretary General, he has also urged Israel not to, of course, go forward with the Rafa operation, because it would be kind of final nail in the coffin when we talk about the on-ground humanitarian situation in Gaza. In today's program, we will be talking about all these developments, the significance of OIC summit, and of course, what needs to be done for stability within the region and beyond. To discuss this and more, we are joined in the studios by former Ambassador Mr. Nasir Khan. Welcome to the program. We are also joined by Mr. Sheharyar Khan, who is analyst. Welcome to the program. And we are joined online by Mr. Hamzah Rifaat Hussain. He is current affairs analyst. Welcome to the program. Ambassador Nasir, let me start with you. Of course, let's start with the recently concluded OIC summit. Of course, this was the 15th summit. How do you see its significance, keeping in mind the current situation, especially after October 7th?
It's gratifying that finally they seem to be united, the OIC. Although I have to say it's a little late. There have been more than 200 days of violence and attack on Gaza, but it's still better than nothing, and I am hopeful that this is not just lip service, and that there is truly unity amongst the 57 countries of the OIC, because as a group they are extremely powerful. They consist of a 2 billion population. Their active armies are about 17.5 million people. And the young people that you have in the OIC countries, they can be conscripted in a conflict, and more than 900 million people, can you imagine, are that age, of fighting age. So altogether, if they are united with their economic clout, with their military clout, they can make a huge difference.
And what do you make of the recent joint declaration and the statement by the OIC, specifically when we talk about the ongoing genocide in Gaza?
I am very glad that they have made this statement, because it's a clear statement. They have called for an immediate, permanent, and a ceasefire without any conditions. So this is language that I am happy to see, happy to hear. But as I said, the point that I was trying to make is that there should be some form of plan and implementation to continue to put pressure on Israel. And more than anything else, there should be unity. They should speak with one voice. There has been talk of a threat of sanctions on Israel.
Of course.
There has also been talk of having Israel expelled from international organizations. So I'm very happy that this has come about. But our Deputy Prime Minister, who is also our Foreign Minister, made a very good statement in a preparatory meeting last Thursday. And he made some very good points. One of which was that they ought to halt the settlements. They ought to also return Palestinian properties. And the most important thing is to reactivate the OIC's ministerial committee on the aggression of Israel against Palestine. So all these things will go a long way towards helping the people of Palestine.
Right, and Mr. Sheharyar, what do you make of this joint statement, and specifically when we talk about the resolve or the urge to push sanctions on Israel?
So, Maryam, it's encouraging. Again, I agree, a bit late, but now that there's focus on taking some action, I think like these countries jointly, there are like some actions on the table that can be taken. For example, a trade embargo, hydrocarbons, oil embargo, so that these options are there on the table to basically, put Israel on the negotiating side. Again, a lot of like onus of this responsibility falls on the Western countries, I would say, and they haven't really been playing their part in basically, upholding the rules-based order that they have been propagating or that they have been advocating in the last like so many years. Again, when it comes to the OIC, the whole collective, I would say, point of focus this time around has been on, the halting of this illegal operation, this like genocide that has been going on, and I think like there's like a lot more to be done now. Another encouraging thing, other than OIC, a lot of like other countries as well, which are outside the Muslim bloc. You look at like countries from South America, like Bolivia, Colombia, or not Muslim, South Africa, and they even like have basically given very strong statements. They have cut completely diplomatic ties with Israel, and that is also like goes to show that the OIC needs to like take more action.
Right, and talking about more actions, Hamzah, in your opinion, and what do you make of specifically the statement that alludes to or that mentions that there should be diplomatic, political as well as legal pressures put on Israel to stop the aggression? What kind of pressures do you foresee in actual happening in the coming days?
Well, thank you, Maryam. I think, you have to be very realistic when you take a look at the OIC statement. First of all, this is actually taking place in the Gambia summit. And when we talk about Gambia as a country in Africa, it was one of the few countries which actually raised the Kashmir issue in United Nations forums as well. So there is a lot of significance, symbolic significance of this particular OIC summit. But when we talk about whether or not, there would be political, legal, and economic consequences, that remains to be seen. Because if you take a look at, Israel's overall profile, its ability to conduct, invasions such as Rafa or, the genocide of Palestinians is predicated upon American military support. So there has been this unanimity as far as, denouncing Israel is concerned, which is a positive sign from this OIC summit. But it remains to be seen whether there could be any political, legal, or economic pressure, because South Africa was one of the few countries which actually raised the entire Gaza genocide issue at the International Criminal Court. And Israel has been openly flouting the ICC's directives. So whether or not it would pay heed to the OIC's, denunciation of its genocide, that remains to be seen.
Right, of course, that remains to be seen. But Ambassador Saab, coming to OIC's significance at this point in time, when, of course, there is chaos in Middle East and, of course, in the Muslim world as well. How do you see the statements regarding Islamophobia in the West by these 57 member states?
Yes, but you see, the thing is, it's all about implementation. For example, there are laws being enacted in Western countries where the Holocaust denial is a crime, where anti-Semitism is a crime, but there's yet to be a law enacted against Islamophobia.
But do you think that, of course, marking the day of 15th March as a day against Islamophobia,
yes,
that is a good start?
Yes, of course it is. Of course it is. And Pakistan has played a major role in that. But at the end of the day, unless and until the major Western powers, due to their own public opinion or the pressure from their own public, change their attitude, in my opinion, very little is going to happen, because the Western powers, especially the United States, has tremendous influence over a lot of Muslim countries. So as long as they continue to supply arms that are going and contributing towards the genocide, I think very little is going to change. On the other hand,
Nasir Sahab, you earlier mentioned that, of course, these 57 member states have a huge population, have the resources, but don't you think that they could exert the kind of pressure that was, of course, mentioned in the joint statement, the political, the diplomatic, as well as the legal pressures that they have alluded to? But, of course, there is little implementation on ground.
yes. So essentially, I'm talking about something theoretical in the sense that if they were to have the unity and the resolve, and if they had the courage to take these steps, because these are steps which will go down in history as something on the better, on the side of good rather than evil. But there are many steps. To give you an example, resolution, United Nations Security Council Resolution 2728 was finally passed with the United States abstaining, but there has been no implementation on that either. So as long as these important powers do not change their attitude, and let me tell you, in the last few days, we've learned that one shipment of arms to Israel has been stopped by the United States. Now, I don't know whether this is a first step towards a larger such action, or whether it is to diffuse a certain amount of pressure that they can feel for 3 or 4 reasons. For example, these huge demonstrations in their universities. For example, about 80 congressmen and congresswomen have written a letter to Mr. Biden to stop supplying arms to Israel if they continue with this genocide. And then the public opinion polls recently, 52% of the US population is now, that they polled, is against the United States supplying arms from American taxpayers' money to actually conduct a genocide. But I have to also say that Mr. Biden and Antony Blinken have constantly tried to put pressure on Netanyahu. The unfortunate part is that Mr. Netanyahu, not only is he working with a coalition of hardliners, it's also that after this conflict, his popularity within Israel has decreased to a level that a lot of people believe that when this war is over, he will no longer be in government. So unfortunately,
there's a lot of pressure for him to resign and, of course, hold elections in Israel.
So, but he feels that as long as I continue this war, and God forbid even escalate this war, as he tried to do with the attack on Syria, on the consulate, the Iranian consulate in Syria, which was a very, very dangerous step. I mean, I cannot even fathom the sort of consequences that could have occurred. And I think you have to give credit to the United States again to actually not fall into this kind of trap, because this thing could have easily escalated. And in this kind of exchange that they've had, you have seen that the so-called Iron Dome, the missile protection of Israel, is not impenetrable, it's not foolproof. And I have to point out, we fail to realize that with such a kind of exchange, there can be terrible human consequences, because you know the size of Israel is actually, the area of Israel is about 1/4 the size of greater Los Angeles. Can you imagine that? So you know, it only takes a few powerful weapons over there, and a lot of Jews living in Israel have also realized this. As a consequence, they have been leaving the country. This kind of news is being suppressed by Israel, but on the social media there is evidence of it.
Right, so, of course. Of course. So, Sheharyar, we will be talking about, of course, Netanyahu's policy of course, trying to halt the current ceasefire efforts as well. But I want you to elaborate more on the significance of this OIC summit. Of course, especially when there is reference to current persecution of Muslims and minorities in India, and of course there is mention of Kashmir issue as well. What do you make of this, and what needs to be done when we talk about the practical steps in order to resolve these issues?
So, Maryam, like whenever we talk about resolutions, especially coming from OIC, if we talk about the UN, when there is a difference when it comes to rhetoric and practical implementation, and I agree with Ambassador Saab, that if you keep on passing resolutions and those resolutions are just like mere piece of paper, then a lot of like countries will not really respect them, you know. If you look at the whole electoral campaign of Prime Minister Modi, as you alluded to the Indian elections that are taking place, that whole campaign has been very shameful, undignified, and has like, it looks like it's been built upon the persecution of the Muslim minority in India rather than on any economic agenda. And the way that whole campaign was carried out should be an eye-opener for the rest of the world, that the Western audiences now backing or like trying to pivot India as a regional power should know the consequences of this right-wing Hindutva ideology, and if it is allowed to permeate into the Indian society, this will have devastating consequences. Again, they're trying to, in a way, create another Israel in South Asia as well. And just for fulfilling foreign policy objectives, a lot of like human rights, like respect for freedom and you know, minority rights, they've been put on the back burner just to basically fulfill foreign policy objectives. And this is exactly what we are seeing in the Middle East as well. So the rules-based order that we talk about, this will not be upheld.
But at the same time, Sheharyar, we see that there are no repercussions for India in regards to its economic ties or trade agreements or strategic ties with some of these member states.
So generally, this is exactly how this like whole global community is now connected.
So we can say that this lip service at this point in time may not be enough and more needs to be done.
Maryam, at one side in the Middle East, there is a live, active, televised genocide going on, in which such a population, like thousands of women, children are being killed every day. Are we going to compare that with, you know, rhetoric or like anti-Muslim policies in India? Right now the world is looking away and it's like shying away from even condemning a live genocide. India, they can basically say, oh, like, you know, minority rights, freedom of speech, freedom of expression, rights and privileges of underprivileged communities, that goes into the back burner. If the world can look away from a live genocide, why would they take any action on what Modi is saying in his own geographical boundaries? So this has a lot of like repercussions globally. When we talk about a rules-based order, when we talk about entities like the United Nations, when we talk about regional entities like OIC, this rhetoric will remain a rhetoric. If you can, you know, trample all the rules and laws and regulations and human rights conventions in one place, then who's stopping, you know, India from doing it to their minorities?
Of course, but Hamzah, at the same time, in your opinion, what needs to be done by these member states in intensifying efforts to protect, of course, Muslim minorities in countries like India, as well as of course, to intensify efforts to stop genocide in Gaza as well?
Well, Maryam, as we speak, Israel has actually taken control of the Rafa crossing with Egypt, and it has actually started bombarding Rafa. So that clearly shows that the OIC's resolution has been thrown away by the Benjamin Netanyahu government. This is what's actually going on the ground. So as far as the OIC is concerned, I mean, this is something that I actually alluded to earlier. It is largely symbolic. It is not necessarily going to have any sort of change in the status quo. Hamas has actually agreed to the Egyptian ceasefire proposal. But despite that, Israel has decided that, yes, we will attack Rafah despite, you know, all the global outcry, whether it's coming from China, whether it's coming from the EU, whether it's coming from the United States. Israel simply does not care. Now, coming to your question, well, you see, I think minority rights, as far as countries like India are concerned, becomes a secondary consideration for many of these countries if there is a systematic statewide crackdown against the Muslim population. And as Sheharyar rightly mentioned, this is something which is very visible in election campaigning. Whether it's muzzling out the opposition or the Congress party, which has been slightly more sympathetic towards the Muslims, or making sure that Modi employs bellicose rhetoric, which actually attacks Muslims as infiltrators. There has been no condemnation from the Muslim world, for that matter. The only condemnation has come from Pakistan. So trade relations and economic linkages, and with India's growing economic profile and with Modi at the center, makes it very difficult for these Muslim countries or these oil-rich Gulf states, or even the wider Asian region, to actually criticize Modi with regard to Islamophobia and attacks on Muslims.
So no repercussions for these states like India or Israel. They are going to continue their actions of becoming the rogue states, of course. And let me take the discussion towards the on-ground situation in Gaza. Ambassador Saab, of course, with more than 34,000 innocent Palestinians killed so far after October 7th. How do you view international community's response, and also what do you make of the recent developments with Hamas agreeing to accept this ceasefire deal that is being negotiated by Egypt and Qatar, and of course Israel not agreeing to it at this point in time?
As far as Israel's not agreeing to it, the hardliners in the coalition of the Israeli government have clearly stated that if you sign this deal, we are going to leave the government. So Netanyahu's government is going to fall. Okay. Now, as far as the international community or justice is concerned, when finally the Israelis, the IDF, entered Gaza, the first thing they did was they started to move people from the north towards the south, saying that we are going to attack this area and that you have to move, as a result of which more than half the population of Gaza moved south to Rafa, towards Rafa.
Of course.
And most of the assistance, the aid agencies, the overcrowding, the disease that started to happen in Rafa. Now finally, when they have decimated the rest of Gaza, they've decided to move towards Rafa. Now, the latest demand was for 100,000 people to move. There's a camp in very bad state near the beach. It's called Mowasi. They said you need to move there. Now, there are a lot of people who would be moving for the second time, okay?
Of course.
But more than that, if there is an attack, as we have been told that bombing has started in Rafa, the worst case, the worst consequence of that is all the assistance to the rest of Gaza flows through Rafa. Imagine what would happen to the logistics, because Rafa is very close to the Egyptian-Gaza border. So there are going to be tremendous consequences.
Right, and that is why the UN Secretary General has also said that this Rafa operation would be final nail in the coffin when we talk about the humanitarian situation or the humanitarian aid that is passing through Rafa. But at the same time, Ambassador Saab, when we talk about this recent deal or agreement, the negotiations that were going on between Hamas and Israel, do you think that Israel not agreeing to this deal puts onus now on Israel? Because just yesterday, Israeli Defense Minister was giving statements that Hamas is not agreeing for a deal, so we don't have any other option but to move towards Rafah. But since they have now agreed, now isn't it putting Netanyahu in a difficult situation?
Well, as far as the moral high ground, if you can call it that, as far as the moral high ground is concerned, now Hamas has the upper hand in a sense, okay? But as I said, the Israelis, not only has Netanyahu said that even if we have an agreement of sorts, I will still enter Rafah, okay? And as I said, their hardliners, the parties in coalition with them, have already scuttled the deal in a sense, saying that if you do sign, saying to Netanyahu that if you do sign such a deal, we are going to leave the government, and which essentially means the government will fall.
Collapse,
will
of
fall.
course.
So, as far as this agreement is concerned, you are absolutely right. Now they can show to the rest of the world that one party has finally agreed to these terms, which seem very reasonable, because they talk about a three-stage solution.
Three phases, of course. Yes.
And so in the first instance, hostilities have to stop from both sides. In the second instance, we talk about the Israeli hostages. And then, of course, the number of Palestinians that could be exchanged for those hostages. Surprisingly, you know, Hamas, for example, if it were in these negotiations to agree to send all the Israeli hostages back, then there is no guarantee that Israeli forces will not enter and create havoc over there.
Right,
because
and Hamas might lose its leverage as well.
leverage,
Yes.
exactly. So, you know, it's a difficult situation, but as far as I'm concerned, I am happy that efforts are being made. I'm glad that even the United States Secretary Blinken has made countless trips to Israel. He's been to Europe, he's been to the UAE, to Saudi Arabia, to Jordan. He's constantly on the move. And he has made statements to say that, you know, for instance, humanitarian assistance, for instance, a ceasefire, all these things. And this being the election year, the Biden government, I'm sure, is quite concerned about the agitation, the activism of the universities, the popularity going down. As it is, he's facing a problem in the elections. So this sort of thing may come up, may show some kind of positive results.
Right, right. And Sheharyar, do you think this is going to be showing some positive results? Because we have, of course, been witnessing the statements from different international human rights organizations, and especially when we talk about the children in Gaza, and of course the displaced population that have been displaced many times now. And of course, like ambassadors have also alluded to earlier, that this was considered a safe zone earlier, and now they are being asked to get displaced from there as well. So do you think this calls for an urgency to stop the Rafa operation by Israel? But then again, the war cabinet wants to move forward with it. What's the logic, in your opinion, behind this? Because this is going to be isolating Israel at the world stage.
Maryam, unfortunately, Israel, first of all, doesn't really believe that it will be isolated. The way we are seeing things, it's not isolated. A lot of Western powers are standing even right now with Israel.
Right, but statements from European Union and other world leaders, the pressures mounting in universities across the globe.
Exactly. On ground, yes. On the grassroots level, yes. When it comes to decision making and the top level decision makers, they're still standing with Israel. It's very unfortunate, but this is the reality. Secondly, we are now in sort of a deadlock situation. And I agree, if Netanyahu and his partners, if they basically do not go forward, and I actually believe they will try their best and try tooth and nail to derail this peace process or this ceasefire agreement. If they do not go forward with this and they are able to derail this, then on the other side, the other most important stakeholder, the US, the Biden administration, they basically see themselves losing their elections in the next 6 months, because they're also lost all support from the Democratic voters, all support from Muslim voters as well. So it's a bit of a deadlock. I personally believe the US will try its best to make sure that the Israeli side agrees to it. And when we also talk about this peace agreement or the ceasefire agreement that Ambassador Saab also alluded to, one thing that really devastated me was that in exchange of one soldier, they are getting 50 Palestinian prisoners. So you can see that the amount of Palestinians, innocent Palestinians that are languishing in Israeli jails, and the value of life of the Palestinian, one Palestinian is 50 Palestinians are equal to one Israeli. So that's what they're trying to project.
Of course, and we have been discussing this as well, that this is a very asymmetrical warfare, Hamzah. But when we talk about specifically Rafa operation and Israel planning to go ahead, and also you also mentioned earlier as well that it has already started bombarding with negotiations going on as well on the sidelines. What do you think would be the consequences for the population residing within Rafa at this point in time? Because of course we know that Rafa is hosting most of the Palestinian or displaced population at this point in time, and especially when we talk about the aid agencies that were already attacked, and this is a very crucial situation. What do you make of this situation, and what should be the way forward?
Well, first of all, the Rafah crossing was a major lifeline for the Palestinians. It was the only crossing through which aid could actually be dispensed towards a population which was absolutely crowded and crammed in tents. And then you also have the UNRWA, the United Nations Relief Work Agency for Palestine. And they have commented, since Israel has actually seized the Rafah border crossing, that aid dispensation would almost be impossible. So starvation is being weaponized by Israel to try and get its demands forward as far as so-called eliminating Hamas is concerned. This is the clear and cut strategy of Israel. By taking control of Rafah, they want to make sure that aid dispensation is not allowed into the territory, and also to try and make sure that they can starve the Palestinians to the point where genocide could be committed, and then they could claim that, yes, Israel actually has the right to defend itself by actually attacking Hamas. So this is going to be the consequence of this entire operation. 12 attacks have been launched since we've been speaking in this program, and residential areas are being bombarded, and also camps as well. And overnight, a Palestinian was actually killed by an Israeli occupation force officer as well. And West Bank raids have also been taking place. So the far right in the Benjamin Netanyahu war cabinet is urging, or the Benjamin Netanyahu coalition, if you want to call it, is urging Israel to continue with the Rafah operation. And there's been a massive outcry. So the consequences are dire and severe. Unfortunately, a lot of blood is going to be shed, and Palestinians really have nowhere to go, because the Rafah border crossing was the only last source of hope for them, because that's where aid was coming from, and that's where some of them could actually cross over to Egypt. That is now being denied to them.
Right, that is being denied to them, but at the same time, when we talk about United Nations Security Council Resolution 2728 that was passed recently, do you think the international community needs to put pressure on Israel to, of course, actually ensure implementation of this resolution? Or do you think that in today's world, the rule-based order is already out of picture? Being a diplomat, how do you see this situation?
Sadly, this conflict has exposed a lot of so-called universal values of the international order. When we talk about democracy, or when we talk about freedom of speech, you can see examples where in Britain and in Germany and the United States, of course, people have been prevented from expressing themselves. So when they give lectures to others about human rights and free speech and things like that, all that has been exposed. Apart from that, unfortunately, because of severe global economic stresses, a lot of countries have turned towards authoritarianism, authoritarian rulers. Now, when you have an authoritarian ruler, he's only one step away from being a dictator in a sense, okay? So obviously, he's not going to put a lot of value on human, basic human rights. And I don't want to again name Mr. Modi, but this is a clear example. There are many other such examples where these authoritarian people are becoming increasingly popular. In some countries in Europe, they are in the government now, and in others, you can see their popularity rising. So at the end of the day, in my opinion, it is going to be on a larger scale, on a wider scale, a conflict between the North and South, between those haves and the have-nots. Unfortunately or fortunately, the have-nots out of a population of 8 billion are 6 billion. So you can imagine that when they start to push back against what's happening to them, against their resources being stolen, now I'm veering away from the Israeli conflict, but your question was, where is all this going? And at the end of the day, when you have populations in Europe and in the Western world that are increasingly becoming less and less economically strong because they have saturated their own markets.
Right,
okay?
right. And of course, we have to address the root cause of the issue first to address all these conflicts.
My point is, the future belongs to the East and to the South, to the global South.
Right.
By which I mean the less developed countries.
Right.
That is where the future is. And these are the last kind of death throes of the economies of the West.
Right.
Because if you continue to support things that at one time you were lecturing us about, now we can see your reality.
Right,
You know,
right,
so we
right.
will
Of
no
course,
longer
this is a
value-
long discussion, former Ambassador Nasir Ali Khan, but unfortunately we are pressed for time. Thank you very much for your valuable
you.
input and joining us in today's program. Thank you very much, Mr. Sheharyar Khan, for joining us in today's program. Thank you very much, Mr. Hamzah Rifaat Hussain, for joining us in today's program. Of course, when we talk about this conflict, from the looks of it, it looks like that Israel will not rest until whole Middle East is in this fire, and the international community needs to take action. That's all from Game Changer tonight. Take care. Allah Hafiz.